It just said it's not gonna record it.
It's
Is
started
that
again
okay,
then.
Pastor Lon? Well, it'll be on Facebook, right? So
Oh,
we'll
yeah,
have.
yeah, yeah. It's not.
It
Okay.
Yeah, we don't record it.
Okay. Oh, we don't. All right.
We're live.
All right. We're live. Watching
What's
myself.
up, world?
All right. Let me make it public. Yeah, it's just on my friends right now. Okay. There we
Okay.
go.
Awesome.
All right. Well, welcome back to this podcast on the roles of women in the biblical narrative. We skipped from Genesis over to Exodus, kind of thinking through the fact that probably the first audience for the book of Genesis was the people who went through the Exodus, and so last week, Susie kind of facilitated and provoked the conversation. And
With
so
a lot of love. With a
yeah,
lot.
no, with a lot of love, and which is why we do it this way, right? It's not like one person lecturing; it's a discussion. And Susie was asking before we went live, had we gotten any feedback? And I had a guy call me a couple weeks ago. He's from the neighborhood, and I've known him like 20 years, and he was like, "Are you guys live now?" Right? So he called while we were doing the podcast, and then afterwards I called him back, and he's like, "That really blessed me." He said, "The way you guys listen to each other, the way you build on what you're talking about." He was like, "This is what church should look like," right? And so I just, that was really encouraging to me to not even like have him talk about the content, but the way we're interacting, that he sees the love and respect, and the way that I think as we listen to one another, we're better able to hear from God, you know. So I just, that's kind of some of the feedback I've been getting. I don't know about the rest of you guys. What have you been hearing, Pastor Lon? Anything?
Yes, I mean, I posted in the WhatsApp group, and people comment on it, and especially the women there, they comment on it. They love it. I mean, there are some specific comments. I'm gonna have to bring it up, but we could continue. Maybe as I move on, I'll get it about it. But somebody was sharing about what we discussed about Pharaoh's daughter and privilege, and how that touched her because she's in a position, sort of a position of privilege, right? And she just saw how Pharaoh's daughter used that position to help Israel, and also the midwives. So that was one of the discussion that I had on it. But generally, people like it. People are talking about how it's an important discussion that we should be having. Yeah.
Good.
And I've gotten good comment from my wife too about our synergy here too. And yeah, that is really good. So yeah, so great. It's great what's going on. Yeah.
Good.
Mhm.
Good. Yeah. Some of the feedback I'm getting is, well, you should have said this and you should have said that. And why didn't you say this? So, but that it's all good because it's true, right? When you're in the moment and you're talking about things, um, uh, you forget, right? But there's so much, and we're going to continue meeting that it'll come out, maybe at different times.
Mhm.
So, but it's very positive. My husband, he says the same thing that your wife says. He said, you guys have very good chemistry together, and there's a respect that you guys have for each other. And that makes me think of one of my friends told me that, and I can't remember um, the whole thing, but he said that the meaning of respect is you look twice. So
Mm,
you look at someone but then you look at them again, right? And so I think what we're doing here is that we are truly respecting each other. We are looking at each other with what we're saying, even when we're feeling uncomfortable with who's ever saying what, because we come from different backgrounds. We are still staying engaged, right? We're looking again, and we want to really listen to understand.
Yeah.
So
No, I appreciate that.
yeah.
And I just think like this is like the more I kind of think about scripture, especially the narrative parts of scripture, but I mean all of it. It is in some ways a very puzzling book, right? It's in a lot of ways both because of its brevity and because of the way it hyperlinks to other texts, and because of the work that you have to do in terms of context, both within the text itself and then the historical text that we have to engage with, and because of the respect that we have for it, so that I remember this one director said when he reads Shakespeare, a lot of times there's these like speeches. He was a guy who directed Shakespeare, famous director, I forget his name. And he said when he reads certain speeches, he's like, this doesn't belong in this play. This has nothing to do with the narrative. He said, instead of me cutting it, I had to make up my mind that Shakespeare's smarter than me. And there's a reason he put it there.
Yeah.
And it's my job to figure out why. And he said, then what I usually find out is those speeches were what the whole play is about. And so I think the more I'm kind of in this, it's like this book is meant to be discussed.
Yeah.
Right? Like it is not meant to maybe be like set in stone, in the sense like I have discovered the right answer and this is it from now on, and right, it is almost more like in the discussion of it and pursuing that we're fed by it. Right? And even fed by each other, because and learning how to do good relationship with one another because of the authority of the text that is bringing us together, right? Like, and so it's just I just think that's really cool, and I feel like that's kind of what we're discovering. And my hope it would just be like other people would just do this, right? Like just like you'd be amazed if you just get together an hour a day or hour a week and ask hard questions about the text and research it together, what can happen, so
this is one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, no, it really is. I look forward to this almost.
It's happy hour.
A lot of trying to figure out conflicts at church.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump in.
Okay.
So last week we took on the very difficult subject of fathers giving their daughters away in marriage.
You know what? I have an afterthought. I had an afterthought, and it didn't even occur to me when I was talking about it until afterwards. And Moses didn't have anything when he was at the well. He left Egypt so fast. He didn't have anything. So when Zipporah's dad is giving Zipporah, that means the custom was that the wife's is it? Oh, wait a minute. No, it is the other way around. Oh, okay. All right. Moses had nothing.
Right. He would be the one paid the dowry to get the woman.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, yes. And so Jethro actually gave her away. Like literally, he didn't receive anything in return.
Wow. And it makes you wonder, is that why that phrase is used?
Right?
Right. Yeah. Is it more like they're trying to say, do you notice there was no dowry here?
Right.
Oh, I
Right.
didn't even think of that, Susie.
Nothing, no cattle, no, or what do you call that? Yeah, no livestock, no nothing. He had
So,
nothing to give her. He had nothing to give the family.
wow. Wow. So
Yeah.
she's grace to him.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow. That's
a good observation.
And
that is-
so Jethro must have seen more than we will ever see.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right. And it goes back to what Pastor Lon was saying about the father of the bride sees,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So
Okay, so this goes deep on like
powerful.
another 2 levels, right? Because wow. Okay, so um Jacob shows up. I think he meets Rachel at a well. I think. Am I right about that? I know we meet Rebecca at a well. But Jacob,
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
was it well too.
because
Mhm.
wells are
Wells are like, yeah, where they meet.
kind of like they're like the rom-com symbol trope of the Bible. Right?
The barber shop.
Yeah, we're at a well. We know what's about to happen. When we meet, right. But if you think about, so check this out. Jacob, after he rips his brother off, takes advantage of him, and is kicked out of his place because of that, shows up at Laban's without money, right? And a lot of people, he weeps when he meets Rachel, and a lot of people think, why is he weeping? Like, that's a weird thing. But one theory is because he's immediately in love with her and realizes he doesn't have a dowry. He realizes that he can't afford to marry her, which is what puts him in slavery, basically, to Laban.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So now,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have this slavery, like, so, and why are we in Egypt? Right. It goes like all the way back to that. I mean, it
Right.
goes all the way back to Jacob lied and all this kind of stuff, and God had to get that out of his family and all this kind of stuff. So now you come to Moses, and we're in the reset narrative where we're coming out of slavery. And Susie, what you just said is Jethro doesn't enslave him
Right.
to make him a husband. He just he sees the grace on Moses and gives him grace because of it. And so it is a reversal of Jacob and Laban.
Yes.
Which was which was like kind of a narrative of slavery, similar to the Egypt story. So now, because he's giving like that, this is the message of liberation, right? That grace is the opposite of slavery, like giving freely because you've been freely given.
Yes.
Is the whole thing. Wow, I never saw that in a million years. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It came to me while I was sleeping.
Wow.
One of those things that wake you, you're 3:00 in the morning and it wakes you up. It's like, oh my goodness. And then it's hard to go back to sleep after that. Well, that's just for me.
Yeah.
Wow. And so it's almost like
it's
almost like we have to, like, the way we get ourselves out of slave systems, right? It starts with us seeing with eyes of grace.
Yes. Yeah.
Seeing others with eyes of grace.
And that we're going to go, hopefully we'll have time to get into that, because I want to talk about that some more.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's jump in. And Pastor Lon, did you have any other thoughts about last week?
Good.
You're good. All right.
Let's go.
All right. So this one's tricky, right? Because we've been kind of focusing on women in all the other chapters. And then, really you get to we're towards the end of chapter 2. God sees Israel, hears their groaning. And then we get into chapter 3, which is like the burning bush, right? And that's pretty much a conversation between Moses and God, right? But we're playing Where's the Women in Exodus. And there's this really interesting passage at the end of this exchange between Moses and God. And I just kind of wanted to read that, and then we can look at the whole context of the chapter. But this is where the women come in again. And I'm starting in verse 20 of chapter 3. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty. But each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters. So you shall plunder the Egyptians. And I think when I read this, that's when it really sealed the deal for me, because if you were wondering if the author of Exodus, which was probably Moses, was going out of their way to point out women, right? And that God was going out of his way to point out the women. Like, this is almost like throws it in there, even though they're not like really part of the narrative. It's like, boom, right there, that it's going to be the women who plunder Egypt on the way out. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to throw that observation out there and kind of say, what do we think is going on with that? Like, why so specifically the women is kind of the big question I want to kind of present us with today. What is being said here?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just thinking that you see woman to woman there. Verse 22, each woman shall ask her neighbor and any woman who lives in her house for silver, gold, and jewelry and clothing. So the woman will ask the other woman. So that just at me, like woman to woman. Mm-hmm. So there's something to that. Is that because there's more, how do I say, the women are more compassionate? Is it because the rapport between the Israeli woman and the Egyptian woman? I'm just trying to think of the fact that it was a woman to woman stuff. So maybe you guys can.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a theory. Okay, this is just a theory, right? And it comes from Pharaoh's daughter, because I did a little bit of digging to try to figure out, because there are people that say that the Exodus did happen, other people say it didn't happen. So I'm in the camp where I think it happened. Okay, so that's where I stand. And so Pharaoh's daughter at the river with Moses, when she found Moses, she was able to make those decisions. And it's believed historically that it's because women whatever wealth they had, they continued to pass it down. So wealth was passed through women, not just men. And so there was a strong matriarchal line. And so in Egypt, the positions, the social and legal position of women was pretty high. And I think that because of that, I think somehow that plays in to a woman, another woman, an Israelite woman coming to the door of an Egyptian woman. It's almost like who they see is more probably powerful. Maybe it was God's way of, because it was God that said, I will grant this people favor with the Egyptians, right? So I am going to grant the Israelite women with favor. So when they come upon that door of the Egyptian, and if it's whoever's there, that the possessions, whatever the possessions they're asking for, will be given to the woman. So I think there's something like that at play here, but that's just my theory, that it has something to do with the respect of women. Like it's like putting the women on their not pedestal, but in their place of honor once again. I don't know.
Another thing I see there, because I went a little bit further, Exodus 12, to see when that took place, because Exodus 3 was talking about what will take place, right?
Right.
So Exodus 12 was when they actually went to do that, right? That was after the firstborns died for Egypt and they were living. So I saw that Exodus 12 from 33 actually conveyed like a very strong sense of urgency. You guys got to get out now. You got to get out now. And in 34, it actually talked about the fact that the people, now we know it was the women that did it, right? But in 12, it says the people went, they had gotten stuff from the Egyptians and all that. But it was really the women from what we saw in 3.
Right.
In 12, it says the people did it. So I was thinking that this could speak to what we've been talking about, these counterparts and what they call it, the firstborn, secondborn counterpart stuff, that there were responsibilities that the Exodus required, like the leaving required, a lot of responsibilities there that they had to do, get things going. But the path that was given to the women was that. And I think just like what you said, is based on their strength, right? While the men were given certain other things to do based on their own strength. So because they were, the entire set of people were leaving. So some went for the resources and the others were doing other stuff, right? Based on their strength. And I've seen that thing, in the Bible where God, like even the tribes of Israel, when God would divide people to do different things, the Levites are supposed to do this, these ones are not supposed to do this. So I'm thinking that combining what you said and this, that it wasn't like the men were not active. It was more like what needed to be done fell to the women and the men based on their strength or the way that God wanted to use them as a counterpart in the whole process. So, which speaks to us now also, because we're talking about the role of women. And one of the reasons why we're focusing on this is because that the role of women in the church, especially even in the world, has been downplayed, women have not been allowed to express their strength as they should, right? Because it's not been recognized. So they've been used as, like just different ways describing women. But I think this is speaking to that strength again.
Yeah.
That in the whole economy of things, in God's plans, there is a special role for the women. There's a special role for the women where they are the ones that will be able to do it, right? So that's another thing I saw there.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And I think as you're talking about that too, I'm reminded of, historically, whenever there's a war, this is, throughout history, the winners would plunder the goods, whatever was good. And many times part of that plunder was women, and they would rape them, right? They would do whatever they wanted, to them. They would become slaves or whatever. And so I think there's somewhat of a redeeming thing that's happening here, where now it's the woman that is plundering versus the men going in and just taking what they want, right? Because the story would be different if it said the Israelite men and plundered, right? So I think that there's something there.
Yeah, that's very good. I mean, that's a very great observation, because if it had said the men went and plundered, you could even assign force to it, because they took you by force. But the women took it it was favor.
Yeah.
They didn't fight for it. They didn't, they just got it because of the grace.
Yes.
That was working on them from God. The favor that was working on them from God. So they were operating on that grace in there. So that,
yeah.
So oh, go ahead, Susie.
No, go ahead, because then I want to say something else. Like I want to move it to, what does that look like throughout history moving forward? But go ahead.
Right. So I think so this is very interesting, right? So there's this focus on the women throughout the story. And the women are the ones who move in opposition to Pharaoh's demand for genocide, right? And so there is this sense of, when I think of Pharaoh, what does Pharaoh represent? He represents both like the masculine, right? Obviously, but he also represents the army and the might and the force, right? And even when Moses rises up for the first time, he uses force in defense, right? And so I kind of wonder, is there kind of an anti-violence sort of thing going on here? Because you have Moses is murdering this guy juxtaposed all the time with this compassion of women, which is not violent but powerful, right? And so that ties deeply in with the ethic of Jesus, right? In his way of not letting empire go and get away with things, but in how he goes about confronting empire, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so so that's in the back of my mind. Second in the back of my mind is some of these Egyptian women threw babies into the Nile, probably. All right. So
that's a deep thought.
That's only like one sentence in this narrative, but this was Holocaust level situation between Israel and Egypt in terms of their babies, the baby boys. All right. So some of these mothers who went next door to women who either murdered their baby boys or looked the other way when it happened.
Wow.
Okay.
Yep.
So
that's good.
So keep that in mind. That's part of the exchange here.
Yeah.
I'm knocking on your door. We're about to leave. Do you remember when you came and knocked on my door? Or do you remember when you sent the mom to knock on my door because you heard a baby crying in the house?
Yeah.
Right. It's that kind of that kind of knock.
Yeah.
And when does this knock on the door happen?
Yeah.
It's the night after every firstborn has died in every Egyptian household.
Mm,
Right?
yeah.
So you wake up in the morning, you're Egyptian woman, you've been in this culture that's been putting these Hebrew babies to death. You've been under the impression that that's the right thing to do for the sake of the state, for the sake of your gods.
Yeah.
But something in you was always, this isn't right, you know? And we get that from both the midwives and Pharaoh. Daughter, she felt it enough to actually do something about it. But a lot of women didn't do something about it. A lot of women let it happen, right, to somebody else's children, right? And then the morning that their firstborn is dead. Now, understand, it's only their firstborn. It's only their firstborn that are dead. All right? It's not the whole family. Right? It was every baby boy that was thrown in the Nile. Right? And so that could have been every time a baby boy was born, until you don't want to have baby boys or you just don't want to have babies anymore. Right? There was something that Pharaoh was trying to do, right? Psychologically to the people of Israel. And not just Pharaoh, the enemy, because I think Pharaoh was enslaved by Satan. That's my sense when I read it, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the context to think about actually the incredible mercy that it's not the men who knock on your door. It's the women who knock on your door. Because back in the day, man, if you defeated another country, the men like almost had the right to rape the women. It was almost part of the almost this sense of justice, right? Because birth had so much to do with ownership, and like we have to always understand that like children and carrying on the name was not the significance of it is so much more than what it is for us today, right? Like, because it involved property, right? It involved ownership. There was no such thing as like a deed. It was like your deed was your children, right? That's what kept the property in your family lineage. That's why like there's weird laws that like that makes no sense to us. It's just because of the hierarchy and of patriarchy. Like patriarchy is not just like, it's like that's the government, right? Like you need a government, and patriarchy was the government. So like a lot of times when we think about these things, they seem really weird to us, but it's like, that's because you got a government elected by people that's established, that makes sure that when someone robs you, something is done about it, right? Now imagine that government was your grandpa, right? Like, right, like, and if the government is grandpa and I don't respect grandpa, then I don't have a policeman to protect me, right? Because I dissed my police, I dissed my army, I dissed everything that protects me, right? So like it's a lot more like caught up than what we think about, because we have a separation between family and government, but at the end of the day, not so much, right? And so the mercy of this is what catches me. The mercy of God is you committed genocide and I knock on your door, and all I ask for, I don't come and rape your women. I don't come and murder the rest of your family. I don't kill your men. I say, can I have your gold and silver and clothes? Because we need some seed money to start a nation that's not going to look like your unjust nation, right?
Wow.
It's a plundering of an unjust nation to start a just nation. And it's done about as mercifully as God possibly can do it, right? without destroying Egypt. It's like Egypt, I got to take you down hard because you're not getting it. But I don't take you, I'm bruising the reed. I'm not breaking it. Right?
That's good.
And
good.
And I'm actually giving these women who probably, many of them that were heartbroken about what was happening in their country, some semblance of being part of restorative justice for being part of a system that had been so brutal and unfair to a group of people.
Yeah.
Right. So there is something so deep about like how you restore once a Pharaoh has taken over, once a Hitler's been in charge of a country, once there's been a genocide, once there's been slavery between two people groups. It's so beautiful because God doesn't just completely destroy Egypt. You see the remnants of his desire for restoration for all of it in the Exodus story. And I think it's interesting that God says women are the best people to go about doing this.
Yeah.
Right? That there's something that women have a strength in that is stronger than men when it comes to compassion and restoration, right? Because I think they're closer to that.
Yeah, I mean, powerful. What you just said was so insightful, like very insightful. Yeah, it just got me thinking. I was just, looking at that situation then and then in their future, like the plundering that took place. First of all, looking from the past, it was a kind of compensation for 400 years of slavery.
Yeah, it's reparations.
Yeah, reparation. So it shows the fairness of God. Like, you know what? I'm not going to let these people go empty-handed. Like, they're going to get something from this. So that was one part, and God chose the women as the people He used to be able to get that reparation, that compensation. But when I looked forward again and I saw what the gold that they got. What was it? What did they use it for? I come into the wilderness and I see when they were building the tabernacle. Right. And Moses says, everybody bring gold, bring this, bring that. And they said, oh, the women and everybody, they were bringing stuff because they had to, everything had to be standard. Right.
Right.
So there was the good use of it, which was in building that tabernacle and all the ornament. Then there was the bad use of it. The golden calf. It's all coming from the gold that they got by
Egypt.
Yeah.
So that was just coming to my mind that what took place then, going forward, and I'll see how it was used well and how it was misused also.
Right. And is this in Moses' mind when God says, I want you to destroy these nations, but you always see Moses like kind of ignore that, because what Moses, his pattern was like, God would be like, hey, wipe these guys out. And he would always kind of be like, he would kind of knock, and say, basically like, there's this opportunity for you to repent. Right. And so I think like it gets back to, I think, this whole idea of the womb and that being the core word, the root word for compassion. That a womb sees what is viable and protects it.
Yeah.
And here, even in the story, God is saying Egypt is still viable. I am not going to completely destroy it.
Yeah.
Right. I am not. Right. And so you see the compassion of God, because it is the women who knock. Because if the men knocked, And that was kind of the energy. It might have been a different situation on what happened.
Yeah. So, yeah, reparations. And Lynn typed it in the chat earlier, reparations. I think that's really important to bring into today, like, and it applies to every place in the world, but I'm just going to speak directly to the United States, right? Because white pastors um, and white, who many of them were slaveholders, and many white powerful people with money, with status, they took Exodus out of the Bible and created their a version of the Bible just for slaves, where there is no talk about leaving your masters, right? Or even asking to leave. And there's definitely, if you don't have that, then you can't talk about slaves leaving with the owner's goods, right? So all of that was taken out of these Bibles. And I saw one in Atlanta at the Civil Rights Museum. They had it encased in there. Anyway, so
seriously, they printed Bibles with
yeah.
Exodus missing.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought they just kind of decided not to preach on it, but they literally cut it out of the Bible.
Oh yeah. Oh
just
yeah.
so somebody could read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which then, when I went to seminary and I became passionate about seeing how the word of God has been misused to enslave, to take away, to justify genocide, justify stealing land and all that. I became passionate to reclaim, what does the Bible really say, right? What does it really say? What was the context? And what have we lost? What has been stolen from us still? In what are the remnants of all that still? How is that still affecting us today? So as I was looking at this story, reparations, that is huge, right? We can't even have a discussion about reparations because there are people that deny our past, right? It was, and people don't know that a Bible was written just to control slaves, right? And so, we can't restore anything unless we admit that those things happened, right? And so there is this great distance between what needs to happen with reparations and restoration and where we are, because there is denial. There is no ownership.
Right. And I kind of think, like, look what God is doing here. I mean, I'm sorry, you wake up in the morning, your baby's dead, right? And then a Israelite knocks on your door. So imagine in the South, everybody's baby dies on the same night, and the slaves knock on the plantation owner's door the next morning. Like, there's no doubt what side God took on that and why he took the side, right? There's an immediate conviction of sin, right? And also probably a conviction of the mercy of it, because it's like, you only took my firstborn, right? Like in that moment, I got to believe a lot of these people realize, like, we should be completely wiped out. Once you realize what we participated in, and that God is on the side of these people to the extent that he will come into our house now, like we used to go into their house, right? And so for me, this should put the fear of God in the United States. It should put the fear of God in us, that that God does see our past misdeeds as a nation. And if you don't deal with it earlier, because they could have dealt with this 8 plagues ago. They could have dealt with it when God showed them there's blood in the Nile. You threw the babies in the Nile. Here's the blood, right? I'm trying to show you as a nation, there's blood in the water. They could have repented right then, right? They could have, and then they don't lose. That's mercy. You already threw babies in the Nile, right? And so that's why, like in this discussion about race in America, you know, kind of our sort of original sin as a nation, like the fear of God should be in us, you know. Yeah. And to your point, Susie, we have taken Exodus out of our Bible. It's still in our Bible, but we don't preach it in context of us as a nation.
Right.
We don't look at the deep ramifications of what it means for us as a country, right? We have a Christianity that in a lot of ways doesn't focus on the Exodus story, doesn't focus on slavery, doesn't focus on these stuff. It focuses on what happens to you when you die, right? And in that sense, it takes it out of the Bible, right? Because it makes it something that's not important to God. And yet Jesus is crucified on Passover, for goodness sakes. It's like Jesus takes it back to Exodus, right? And to genocide and to slavery and to oppression, right? Like he makes his death and resurrection coincide with this story, right? So it's so important that this is in the teaching of the church, right? Because it's clearly a foundation of everything that we're supposed to understand about the heart of God.
Yeah, you know, I would like to speak to the reparations. So speaking around, like I speak around African countries, I speak to Africans in diaspora, African Americans, and all that. I like to speak directly, you know, know, because a lot of these things have happened, not like Susie, just like what you said, not just in the United States, but all around. We have countries like Congo that is actually, Congo should actually be the richest country in the world because of the natural resources that is there. But a lot of those things have been plundered. When you drink Lipton tea, when you drink, I mean, I don't want to mention brands, sorry, you know, when you drink coffee, do all kinds of stuff, a lot of those things are coming from there. There's a lot of diamond and gold and all kinds of things coming from Africa. Like Africa is like the bread basket of the world. Like many things that we use, the raw materials. And I go to some of those countries and I see the mines, I see the oil wells and all that. Many of these, you know, companies here, they are there. The environment is affected. The people there, all kinds. This is happening all over. And then there's wars that are instigated and started. To keep people divided, stolen from, you know, like outsiders, to keep them divided so that they will not develop. So that is going on all around. Now, I tell the Exodus, there's something called liberation theology. I don't know if you guys know. Yeah, but I always like to speak reality to my Black friends, brothers, and sisters, that in Exodus, look at it, in Exodus that we just read, there was no time where Pharaoh and his council sat down and they said, we're going to be fair. We're going to do reparations. It never happened. What happened? God intervened. God intervened. What we read just now was a supernatural flow of God to bring the reparation. All Israel had to do was listen to the instructions of God, and there was reparations. So I would like to speak to those who wait for the time where human beings will come together and make some laws and say, oh, we're going to do reparations, we're going to do all that. Rather, to look to him and to see signs of it. So, for example, despite what I just talked about, we see signs right now of restoration that is orchestrated by God taking place. in the nation, especially among Black people all around, revivers of the move of God, mission fields before, now becoming mission sending stations to different nations. A lot of those things are happening. There's some favor that is coming. And I'll tell you, a lot of those things also now, women are playing a big part of it, just like in Exodus, where restoration is taking place. There's still more, but it's taking place because God is moving.
Mhm.
So I want us to, also make sure that we talk about supernatural reparations.
Yeah.
Because what we saw in Exodus was a supernatural reparation. It was God moving, causing favor. It was God that initiated it. It wasn't something that they had to go try and get by themselves without the hand of God. And it wasn't something that Pharaoh and his people decided. It was the hand of God moving. So to my Black counterparts watching and all that, just to tell you that God is moving, we can trust God, just like what happened in Exodus, that God is a just God. Is a just God. And to other people, I love what both of you have said. The fear issue, bring fear into all our hearts, because this is not just a black and white dynamic. It happens in all kinds of power structures like that. That God will come in. Yeah, we should have the fear of God, that God will come in like he came in. We know how Pharaoh ended up, and his army. Yeah.
So there's a book that's been out for a few years. It's called Reparations, A Christian Call for Repentance and Repair by Duke Kwon. And in the beginning, he talks about his why for writing this book and the whole project of reparations. And then he lists some hopes that he has, right? Of if people really entered into this posture of listening and seeing what has been stolen, what has been destroyed, and then how we continue in that narrative by denying that has happened. What does hope look like in all of that? And so is it okay if I read his couple paragraphs? He says, our hope for ourselves is that the call to reparations will continue to change us, to shape our imaginations, our loves, and our labors. We hope to become people whose lives are inexorably bound to the vocation of repair. Our hope for our children is that each of you will renounce the beguiling myths that tempt us and instead see the truth about the world. And not only that you will see the truth, but that in seeing it, you will give yourselves in your own ways to the work of repairing the world. We know this means that your lives will often be marked with grief, anger, and struggle. We grieve this for you, but this also means that your lives will be marked by the truth and by the faith, hope, and love that true lives require. As you labor to live the truth, remember that you are crowned with light. And our hope for the church is that the work of reparations, the work to repair our communities from the ravages of white supremacy, will become central to its mission. Our hope is that the language of white supremacy and reparations, now so unfamiliar and awkward, will one day become as fixed in the church's imagination and fundamental to its vocation as the language of repentance and reconciliation is today. This is the only way that the church can fully live with integrity and the only path to beholding the joy of redemptive love made flesh in the streets of this world. Our hope for our nation is that we will renounce our willful blindness to our history, confess and give ourselves collectively and collaboratively to the work of repairing what we have done. Until we do this, we will never embody the meaning of our creeds, never escape the secret shame and uneasy conscience that shadows our national identity, and we will never know peace in our cities.
Wow, that is powerful.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, sometimes some of the things that we experience is just justice crying out to be met. Like what are some societal stuff that keeps going that we're trying to find answers to? It's just justice crying out that some things need to be done to
Right.
make this.
Yeah.
We turn our eyes away from it, like from the history and everything.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and if we look at this as if we look at this through the lens of a relationship, so maybe a marriage relationship, a friendship, um, co-workers working together, if one does something very harmful to the other and says, well, that was yesterday. I'm a different person. Let's just keep going and focus, on the future. I know for me in a relationship, it will be very hard to continue moving because when you move together in the future, it's not side by side. It's you become stronger when you are interconnected together, right? And
Mhm.
so if I am in a relationship like that with someone and they don't admit what they've done, then they don't see for themselves, where did that come from? Or, why did I do that? And I am sorry. I see how I hurt you. I see what I have done here. And I'm not going to pretend anymore that I didn't do it and that I didn't cause you this pain of where you are right now. Without that kind of stuff, it is very difficult to heal and become stronger together, to do whatever work is meant to be done in front of you, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. So that leads me to next week's cliffhanger. All right. So
wow, this time went by fast.
yeah. Yeah. So I think it's really interesting if you look at this Exodus 3, how many times Moses tries to get out of the assignment, right? But how hard God presses to make sure it's Moses who does this, right? And so what I'd like us to think about, and I think it goes together with this conversation, what is it that we can learn in that conversation, I think? So if we know that the final chapter of this story is this kind of reparations conversation between the two women with dead children, right?
Mm,
When you think about, like, God gets to the end of what he tells Moses is going to do, what he's going to do, and the end is not the beginning of it. Is like, I just want to double check I'm saying this correctly, but yeah, so this is this is the last stake in what's going to happen, is this conversation between these women who have all lost their children because of Pharaoh, right? The Hebrews have lost their children because of the genocide, and the Egyptians now are in the same boat. It's almost like God is saying the whole thing that I'm doing, right? He starts with, I'm going to take you out of Egypt and bring you to my holy mountain. He ends with this conversation. I'm after this conversation, these two women, and I'm after the reparations that comes after that conversation. Why Moses? Why Moses as the instrument to bring that conversation together?
hmm,
That's what I want to look at. What
right.
is it about Moses and his story and all that we learn about him just in the first 3 chapters that makes him so invaluable for this reparation conversation that's going to be had at the end of this whole process? And what does it tell us about God? what does that tell us about God and what we should be focused on as the people of God?
All right.
Awesome.
All right.
All
So,
right.
until next time.
So
Yeah.
next week, bless
All
you
right.
guys. Have a great,
All right.
have a great
Blessing.
week. All right.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.